the Brothers Karamazov, Book 11 in Chapter 4. We have followed Alyosha from Grushenka in Chapter 1 to Madame Holikov in Chapter 2 to Lise in Chapter 3, and now we finally get to Dmitri's cell. And before that, a little bit of background about the visitors and the police captain who, like most places, had strict policies on who could visit Dmitri at first, and then those policies had been relaxed because the captain has grown affectionate toward all of the people associated with Karamazovs. He likes Alyosha. He likes his interpretation of the apocryphal scriptures. He likes the Grushenka that is, not the Grushenka who he thought she was. He likes the brilliant Ivan, who is this great philosopher who was self-taught. And so this aw shucks police captain has let them visit more often and more casually and more intimately than maybe at first thought. So that's good. If you're going to be in prison, it's nice that Dmitri can have visitors. Except that we see icky old Rakitin pops up again in this chapter, as he's in the previous book and the previous chapters. We keep hearing these stories about Rakitin and what's he doing there. Well, he's there indirectly, I think, to undermine Dmitri's faith, but he's there directly because he's going to write an article, and of course his article is about the inescapability of Dmitri's crime. So, of course, he's assuming the worst about humanity. He's assuming that Dmitri did kill his father. And then, again, he is giving the opposite of Father Zosima's worldview, that even though he is the one who killed his father, he's not guilty of it. So he's another Madame Holikov. He's another parrot. He's another ape of Ivan's worldview, that somehow Dmitri is not responsible. The old sociology defense, he's only that way, she's only that way, because they grew up in that context. And so that's the thesis of Rakitin's article. But Rakitin, it seems like he's not just there to do research, he's also there to convince Dmitri of his worldview, and it's the discussion that goes way back to Book 2 between Zosima and Ivan, and later in Book 5 between Alyosha and Ivan, and that is the non-believing problem of evil, which is if you don't have a God, then you don't have order and righteousness emanating from the character of God, and therefore, if we are all just biological accidents, then everything would be permitted. And so that's the discussion, again, now that Dmitri and Rakitin are having. And Rakitin doesn't see this as a problem. He has a vicious laugh about this reality. So Alyosha hears this all out, and now he wants to, he doesn't really want to talk about Rakitin. He wants to talk about what's up with Ivan and what's up with the secret. And so finally, Mitya, Dmitri, tells Alyosha the secret, and the secret is America, the escape to America with Grushenka. And he asks Alyosha not to be a conscience, as Ivan is concerned about, but rather to not judge, just to hear him out. And Alyosha's calm, wise response is, don't decide just yet. Dmitri is almost assuming his condemnation, and he can't go to Siberia and sing a hymn in prison without Grushenka. He needs Grushenka, and he needs America, and all that's going to take is money, and he can get money from the Ivans and Katerina Ivanovas of the world. So maybe America is the promised land for Dmitri. So that's what Alyosha wants to know from Dmitri. But what does Dmitri want to know from Alyosha? And that is the million-dollar question. That is, goes back, harkens back all the way to the great Grand Inquisitor chapter of Book 5, Chapter 5, in which Ivan talks about the temptation of Christ in the wilderness by the devil, and the temptation of choice and free will. And the Grand Inquisitor condemns Christ for giving people a free will, because it's too burdensome. He should have chosen condemnation to give people a comfortable life here without the burden of choice, of choosing, of doing, of proceeding, of living by faith. And so now Dmitri wants Alyosha to speak to that, but we're not talking about a parable. We're not talking about a story in the Bible. We're not talking about a poem made up by Ivan. Now we're looking through prison bars at your brother. And Dmitri wants Alyosha to speak to his situation and say, do you believe that I'm guilty? And so that Alyosha is the conscience, and so his verdict, his comment on either justification or condemnation is Dmitri's salvation or condemnation. And so Alyosha, of course, believes the good, believes that the burden of free will that Christ gave to all people is not the death sentence that Ivan thinks it is, or the Grand Inquisitor thinks it is. And so Alyosha says, of course not. Of course I don't think that you did that. You're better than that. I've never thought for a moment that you did that. And so really interesting way of looking at this, I think, by Dostoevsky, is that this now breathes life and hope and humanity into Dmitri, but as Alyosha leaves, it's depressing to him that Dmitri is, I guess, such a pathetic creature that on the night before his trial is to begin, that the verdict of Alyosha is such a big deal to him. And so you see the two Karamazov brothers kind of leaving with the exact opposite emotional reaction. But we see at the very end here of this chapter, Alyosha is not just depressed about that brother, he's also really depressed about Ivan, and he's actually more worried about Ivan's soul than he is Dmitri's, somewhat paradoxically. So as we're walking with Alyosha through a conversation per chapter here, we can see there's these glimmers of hope in Grushenka and Dmitri, and these real downers of conversation with Holikov, Lise, and hearing about Ivan.